Brett, it's great to have you here on the Learning Leader Show. Welcome.
Hey, good morning, Ryan. Thank you. Welcome.
I first have to say and want to say thank you very much for your service. You served our country in such a hero, like you're a hero, man, like you really are. Now, it might sound weird to hear, but to me, it's true.
Yeah.
And so I just want to first say thank you.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I was given the honor to serve for 30 years in the Navy and only retired about 6 months ago, and no regrets. I enjoyed everything about it, everyone I met, all the lessons I learned, places I lived, all the experiences I had. So I feel pretty privileged to have been able to serve as long as I did with all the great men and women that still are out there today, stand and watch and protecting what we believe in.
Let's go back a few years. This is a pivotal moment in your life. The specific day was April 3rd, 2020. What happened on that day and why did it happen?
Yeah, so I think, I do remember that day. It wasn't like it was, a couple years ago, but seems more recent. It certainly kind of became a pivotal moment in my career as a helicopter pilot, as a fighter pilot, as a aircraft carrier commander, as a leader, and I think maybe just as a person. I've always kind of prided myself as a leader of trying to make sure I focused on what mattered most, and I learned early on in my career from folks that your number one priority are the folks you take care of, the folks you're leading. I had a chief once who pulled me aside when I was a young lieutenant, many years back in Hawaii, my first duty station, and he said, "Sir, you got three priorities as a leader. Your first priority is take care of your sailors. Your second priority is take care of your sailors. And your third priority is to take care of your sailors." And he, a little tongue in cheek, but I think it really resonated with me. I was certainly impressionable, and he was this kind of salty Navy chief with tattoos and been on the Navy longer than I even knew the Navy existed. But I took that to heart, and I think that is, for me, is always fundamental. And as a leader, what I try to remind myself is I'm really there to take care of folks, not coddle them, not baby them, but make sure I take care of them so they can be as strong as they can in whatever it is they're doing, whether that's aircraft carrier or even outside of the military. So that moment really came down to a point in time when I think on board the Theodore Roosevelt, much like the world, we were coming to grips with COVID and this world pandemic that no one had really seen coming or quite understood yet. And we were still pretty early on in the stages of COVID and how to deal with it. And, I think there was one point where we thought you could transfer it on cardboard boxes. And so we stopped taking Amazon deliveries and there's all kinds of stuff that we were all going through. But we all knew it was a threat and it was a risk. And as a leader, obviously we deal with risk management and weigh in, the risk and the benefits and stuff of ways you can mitigate that all the time. So for me, I think I resonate back to what that chief had told me that, as you go through all this and you're thinking about the impact of COVID to both your ship, the mission, and your sailors, you can't lose sight of your sailors. They are not indispensable. In fact, they're the strongest asset you have in any warship and any military unit for that matter. And so I was doing all I could to protect them and make sure they got all the care they needed. And unfortunately, on a aircraft carrier, there's not a lot of extra space. So it's not like you can isolate or quarantine like we've learned over the years to do. In fact, it's probably one of the worst environments for that. So, we have ways we can mitigate that. But again, at the time, all we knew is it's a very fast spreading disease, and we knew there was fatal consequences. And even with a 1% fatality rate, that's quite a bit when you're talking a crew and a staff and an air wing with 5,000 people. So, it didn't take long to play the odds, understand that I was going to do all I could at that point. We were safely in port in Guam, which is when that date was. And we needed to get the sailors off the ship. So we'd gone through the normal channels to try to get the attention and the help we needed, despite being, the commanding officer of this $10 billion warship. You do have limitations. You can't go where you want all the time. You have to work with foreign policy and Department of Defense. You have to, work with the political side of things in terms of Guam and how we mitigate and how we take care of the sailors ashore, as it were. So in the end, I kind of cut through what I thought was some red tape, knowing that we were in the fog of war. And I think for most folks are familiar with that term, but the fog of war really defines the fact that when you think about the folks on the front line in combat or wherever it was, in our case, I would argue we were on the front line of the COVID battle at the time on the ship. But as you report that up the chain, by the time we reported to the staff, who reported it back to Japan staff, that reported to Hawaii staff, reported back to the Pentagon, that reported it to the executive branch. There's a lot of people in there, and it's a little bit of a telephone game. So you knew it took time. You knew it took time to get decisions, and it took time to get the resource you wanted. And I was getting frustrated that the normal fog of war for admin stuff was just not going to be acceptable if that risk of even 1% existed for the sailors. So long story short, I sent the email to the folks in that chain of command that I knew were fellow naval aviators. I knew that they were action-oriented leaders that I knew would take action. I knew they wouldn't necessarily appreciate the fact that I was kind of rocking the boat, so to speak, but I think in the end they understood why I was doing it, and lo and behold, they did. They made sure that we got the care and the help we needed, and we were able to then quickly get sailors off the ship and spread out across the base, and then even in the hotels in Guam to successfully quarantine them, which again to this day we know it's certainly one of the best things we can do. However, that email, that request got out in the public sphere, and there's no secret we were pierside in Guam. Every sailor has a cell phone, and they still had access to call home, and we're pierside in a public port. There, the people can see it. So it wasn't that we were pierside. It was maybe more that I was concerned enough that I was pushing back the overall maybe more cavalier administrative attitude at the time, and so it got some probably more press than anyone anticipated. End of the day, the acting secretary of the Navy thought that then I became a liability, and he was concerned with my methods, and he chose then to relieve me, which is kind of unheard of. He normally would not be how that's done, but he ended up giving the order for my boss, the admiral on the ship, to relieve me of command, and so that's how it works. And for those that were maybe frustrated by that, I mean, I just have to remind everybody we are a civil-led organization. It's the whole Paul Mill stuff, and you can talk about how our country's set up, but there's a reason why we have civilians in charge of the military ultimately, and he has the power to do that. I could disagree with his reasoning and his why. It's certainly, I disagreed with the sense of urgency that we all had, but I was willing to accelerate the process a little bit, and then he chose then about 3 days after I asked for help, kind of rock the boat, so to speak, to relieve me. So April 3rd is the day I left the ship for the last time. And so what kind of, I think, captured for a lot of folks was the sight of me leaving the ship. And over the course of the day, it took me to pack up and to leave the ship. Word had gotten out that I had been relieved. And I think as a show of solidarity, several thousand sailors on board the ship at the time, lined up to give me a pretty cool send-off, I guess. It's not your normal way you leave command with a band and pomp and circumstance, but it was about right, and I think it was their way of thanking me for putting my neck out there to help them out and take care of them. And again, it goes back to Chief Garcia back in Hawaii. At the end of the day, it was still about taking care of your sailors, and I felt like that's what I was trying to do. So I left sad that it was over, but I also knew that I stood by my priorities as a leader.
I watched the video, and they're chanting your name as you're walking off. I mean, what emotions are you feeling as you're walking off for the last time and your sailors are chanting your name?
Yeah, it's probably everything, right? It was a little bit, I was certainly frustrated that the decision had been made to remove me. I was sad that I was leaving what I thought was certainly the best job I'd ever had. That is the pinnacle of any naval aviator's career. In addition to being the commanding officer and knowing all about nuclear power and how the ship works and managing 5,000 people, I still had the bonus of I could go fly a helicopter one day, I could jump in a fighter the next day, and I could fly. So you could be commander of an aircraft carrier and still go fly up your own ship. And meanwhile, you get the chance to interact with 5,000 people, true American patriots from all over the world that served on board. So there couldn't have been a better job. And I think you could ask any aircraft carrier commanding officer, and they'll tell you it's the best job they ever had. So I was sad I was leaving. I was sad in some way because one of the mantras I had was, be ready for the fight. I used to tell the sailors all the time, like, keep your head on a swivel, keep your eye on a shipmate, and be ready for the fight when the day comes. And I even said, as we were facing kind of COVID as a battle, so to speak, I said, this is your fight right now, So, and I reminded them before I left the ship that right now, COVID is your fight, and I just need you guys to take care of each other be smart about it and fight so you can go on and we can be ready for the bigger fight, the bigger mission, as it were, if called upon. So I was disappointed I was leaving them, in some ways too. I felt, like here I am after talking this big game and I'm about to leave them when they have this fight ahead of them still. And I knew they were in good hands, and we had great leaders on board the ship that would step in and continue that fight, as it were. So maybe in some ways it was also me hoping it was their forgiveness, knowing that I'm leaving them at the start of the COVID fight, and them, acknowledging that they're okay with that. So this was all that,
Yeah. What did you do next?
So next I left the ship, and I was so I tested positive for quarantine about 2 hours before I left the ship.
For COVID?
For COVID, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, test positive for COVID. So at that point, in addition to that, I knew I had to go in quarantine when I left the ship. So I was taken to a hotel room, and hunkered down for what ended up being 30 days until I was clear and could fly home. So I was in the hotel room, and I had plenty of people checking on me. And I think my master chief, when I left the ship, snuck out an Xbox for me so I could play some golf games and watch Netflix and get caught up on things I hadn't done in a while. And then I could actually see the ship from my window of the hotel, which was interesting.
Wow.
So I could look across the bay and see the ship. And so I thought that was an interesting place to be for 30 days as I watched them go through and fight, continue the fight that they were going through as they got off the ship and quarantined and got healthy and eventually went back to sea very successfully. I
still don't get why sending an email trying to protect your people would get you fired. I don't get it. There's got to be something I'm missing here. Without, I know there's probably a lot to it, but that's the part I just don't fully understand.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think in some regards, the initial response from the Navy was, hey, this is exactly what we want from our commanding officers. We want them to fire the red flare, so to speak, when they need assistance. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And that was really my intent. I think in some regards too, though, you could think of the national dynamic we were in as we were trying to manage the narrative from an executive level, national level. And I think that for some, maybe on that side of the house, it was hey, this is going to raise alarm bells and indicate that the administration isn't doing all they should be doing to protect our trade. And I get that. I understand their perspective and was much broader than mine. I'll be honest. I knew my priority as a commanding officer was to take care of my sailors. And I wasn't saying I was oblivious to the other things going on, but we weren't at war. We were not in a shooting match with anybody out there. So in my mind, all that really mattered was take care of the sailors. And in the end, my hope was that in doing that actually saved the Navy from, potential bad PR. If we, heaven forbid, we had, we did unfortunately lose one of our sailors shortly after I left the ship from COVID complications. But had we lost a lot more, I think it would have been another black eye for the Navy and the administration. I was trying to avoid that. So that was kind of one of my goals. But I think they just lost, anytime you lose control of the narrative or anytime you feel like you're being undermined, I think it can be frustrating for a large organization. When that acting secretary of the Navy, he came out to the ship shortly thereafter and tried to rouse the troops, as it were, that kind of backfired, and he shortly was relieved, or he resigned shortly after that trip, about 3 days later. The Navy actually considered reinstating me, which would have been the first time that's ever happened. So I had gotten to the point where I was drafting my return to the ship speech, as it were, at the direction of the senior Navy leadership. And then more politics at play. They said, let's hold on a little bit. Let's do a more thorough investigation. So the initial investigation that recommended reinstatement, they held that, and then they did a lot longer, more in-depth investigation. And then the end, as time goes on, you realize it's going to be harder for many reasons, for me to then be reinstated. So in the end of the day, when they did the following investigation, they determined they tried to say it wasn't email, and that's fair. That could be the case. They thought it was more that we didn't handle the situation well as we could have. But we were doing all we could. I mean, once we pulled Pierside, and getting the aircraft carrier safely Pierside is no easy feat. It's, 100,000 tons, 1,000 feet long. You don't have a lot of wiggle room. You have, so once we got safely Pierside, a week before that, I was relieved. Then we were all in on this fight of helping out the sailors and doing what we could. But at the end of the day, they thought there's things we could have done better, and that's fair. I mean, 3 months later, we knew a little bit more about COVID, and we knew a little bit more about how to mitigate some of that stuff. But at the time, with what we had, I think we did.
Yeah,
I think the team did about as good as anyone could have done.
Yeah, it was right at the beginning when we all were like, what's going on? We had no idea. At your retirement speech, I watched it today, and it was awesome. And some of what's in your retirement speech is also in your book. And so I actually wanted to start by focusing on a few of those things you talked about during that speech, because the cool thing about I think your style is almost every I mean, this show's called the Learning Leader Show. So I love leaders who, regardless of how high they get, they're constantly learning. They're never stopping. And that's you. That's why I wanted to talk to you. One of the main reasons. But every kind of key learning or fun story, they're always connected to people. And another mark of a humble, great leader, I think, right, is you understand that you're out there with others, leading them and learning from them. So you said the three focus areas were Clydesdales, surfing, and espresso. I'd love to talk about Clydesdales, surfing, and espresso. So first, can you talk to me what it is about Clydesdales and the people involved, that phrase that helped you as a leader?
Yeah, and I think I think you're absolutely right. I think someone much smarter than me said, learn like you're going to live forever. And I believe that to be true every day. And even now, I find myself in a totally different walk of life in the nonprofit world, and recognize there's still a lot to learn. So I think it's whether you're a leader or not, I think that's the secret of life, is keep learning. And I found that throughout my career, my 30-year career, that I was learning every day, right? And sometimes formally. 10 of my 30 years were formal education in school, in flight school. That's no insignificant investment on the Navy's time. Pretty impressive. But you still learn. The other 20 years, I'm still learning every day. And I would argue mostly from people that have been doing their jobs longer, or just their perspective. I know in no way do I have the full perspective on anything in life, but I know that collectively I can get some pretty good consensus. So the Clydesdale story, it was funny because, everyone, we have these characters in life and people we interact with they don't necessarily say a lot, but when they say something, you just know it's important, right? And they're one of the, they listen way more than they talk, which is a good trait, I think, for anybody. But he was a senior chief in charge of all the damage control on the ship, and we were doing this massive exercise on the aircraft carrier that we did pretty frequently. And you practice like damage control. So you pretend you have fires throughout the ship, or you've been taking missile hits or torpedo hits. And the ship, that's all they're focused on. And they had everybody on the ship as a firefighter, we say. So they were out and about doing their thing. And anyways, we would sit there and I would ask a lot of questions. And we were in the kind of the central, the headquarters on the ship, where we would monitor the stuff to evaluate performance. And yeah, I think specifically, he made the comment just out of the blue. He's like, "Sir, how much do you think a Clydesdale can pull?" And I can tell you, I'm not a farmer by trade. And, with some coaxing, he said, it's about, 6,000 to 8,000 pounds, I think, is the story. It's okay. That makes sense. I, again, never had a need to pull the Clydesdale. But then he said, "All right, sir, how much do you think 2 Clydesdales can pull?" And knowing I was a math major in college, I said, "Well, this is pretty easy. Just 2 times 6 or 8, so about 16,000 pounds, senior chief." He's like, again, real stoic. He's just like, "Nope, sir, 2 Clydesdales can pull 24,000 pounds. Some cases up to like 28,000 pounds." And that's all he said. He didn't give me this full explanation and talk about, why that is and or any kind of evidence to support his claim. But it was one of those things that stuck with me, because it was obvious what he was trying to say was, when you have 2 people working together as a team, that the strength of them together far exceeds their individual contributions. And I think we know that to be true in any walk of life, whether it's on a sports field, for most of us that have ever played sports, or at work, or I don't know, your marriage, your family, your kids. I mean, it really applies across the board. But it was a way for him to distill it down to something I'd always known to be true, that, that with teamwork, we can accomplish amazing things. And I learned that in the Navy firsthand. I mean, I think that, I'd always wanted to be a pilot. And when I found myself flying a F-18 in combat, at the tip of the spear for naval aviation, as it were, you're not there by yourself. It's not, this is no movie type script where it's just that one jet's going to go save the day. You were there because you have about you have thousands and thousands of people that helped you to get there. Like, from launching off the aircraft carrier to giving you fuel airborne to radar to sanitize the area to, you name it. So, life, I believe, is a team sport. I think that's true whether you're a leader or not. But as a leader, if you understand that, then you understand the importance of doing things to promote teamwork and camaraderie within your organization. And if you can build that culture of teamwork in your company, your nonprofit, your military unit, I think that's you set the stage for pretty great success. And I think that takes leaders to understand that. It takes leaders to know people. You have to be willing to listen so you understand their strengths and weaknesses. But again, if you can build a good team with a good culture, there's nothing you can't do. So I give Senior Forgeman credit with that little nugget he just kind of dropped in passing that I never forgot after he did it. And there's physics behind it. I had someone at my retirement. He was concerned I didn't understand the physics behind it, because there are reasons why, obviously. So I got this long dissertation from a physics professor as to why it makes sense but more importantly, it really means, it shows that with teamwork, there could be physics, all that's true with Clydesdales, but it's certainly much greater than that. And it's also, maybe doesn't have to be scientific. It's proven you can, as a team, you accomplish more. I think we know it to be true.
I like the lessons where he doesn't give you the full answer, right? He gives you, and you got to figure out the rest. Like you can get there. Obviously, you're a smart guy, but the fact that he doesn't explain it, it's like the guy who tells a joke and it's not a funny joke if you have to explain it. This knowledge is so good. Just kind of give you the front end. You'll figure out the back end.
Yeah.
How about surfing?
Yeah, and which is obviously the title of the book. Surf when you can. I think surfing there's so many facets to it, and let me be clear. I'm a very mediocre surfer. So if anyone sees me surfing, they're going to wonder, how I was given the right to title the book this. But I do like to surf, and I surf as much as I can for many reasons. But, to me, I think in today's environment, we're so ingrained with just the day-to-day nuances of email and Zoom meetings and to the point of being overwhelmed. And, I found that as a leader, that I was at my best when I had time to think, when I had white space, if you manage your calendar that way, or, you had the time where you weren't being asked for something or expected to give something or on the phone or in a meeting, because you really need to think. I mean, leaders are paid to make, to think and make decisions. I think that's really why you ideally rise to those positions in any organization, and you're being paid to think. And to think, it's not about speed, it's about thinking clearly and having time to think. So I say that because surfing for me was a way, to force me to take a step back and have time to think. And so for me, it's surfing. For others, it could be yoga. For others, it could be church. It could be reading. And that was what it always kind of forced me to think about is, hey, how do I find time today to surf, whatever that case may be. And it could be actually surfing, or because the waves are good, or it could be, finding the time to think. And I do, I'm also, I love the ocean, and I love nature, and I love being out in the water, and I like, I like challenging myself when the waves are big, and there's many other facets to it, but I just find that surfing is a way that I don't take my phone out there. I don't answer emails. I don't answer texts. It's just me, my board, somebody's probably up and down the lineup, and then a chance to kind of just ponder life. And I just find that, a day has never gotten worse from surfing for me. It's always better in some regards. So, and I think it's important as a leader to think, and that's really why I think in the end of the day, I titled the book "Surf When You Can" as a reminder that everything going on, you have to think as a leader, and you have to understand what's important about being a leader. And I think it's a lot of the book is the softer side of leadership, as it were. I mean, I think fundamentally, I always tried to be. There were three areas I was focused on: being a strong family man, as a father to my three sons, husband to my wife, aunt, uncle, brother, all that stuff to the family. I think that was important to me. I think being a warrior was important. I think understanding the skills necessary in my trade as an aviator and in combat or landing on an aircraft carrier. I think being a warrior is my skill set, as it were, and then being a leader. And each one of those facets, whether it's family or being a warrior or being a leader, has different characteristics. And you could argue, as a family man, you need to be patient and understand your kids. As a warrior, you have to probably have more discipline and courage. And as a leader, you have to have vision and the ability to think. And And what surfing does, it does for me, it kind of crosses all three, because I was able to spend time with my family surfing. I think as a warrior, it challenged me physically surfing, and there was a chance to take risk, get on a bigger wave that I was used to. And as a leader, it allowed me to think. So with those three areas, I always thought were important to kind of balance my life. I thought surfing was one way to kind of cross across all three, as it were.
I find the exercises like surfing. So I live in the Midwest, so I'm not surfing, but long walks in nature, lifting weights. I like to cool down on the elliptical while reading. In a world where we need to make decisions, we need to come up with ideas. We need to think of how we're going to teach what we've learned to others, which is certainly a big form of leadership. I feel like the best ideas and teachings and stories and thoughts come to mind usually during that space. So I'm wondering for you, when you're surfing, when you get out of the water, are you like writing down ideas that came up with when you're out in the water? Like, what's it like afterwards? Like, I sense that it could be a good recipe for documenting your thoughts and preparing to help other people.
No, you're absolutely right. Like, I think about when I do run, I like to run and stuff too. And there's times when I'm running and you'll have an idea and you just stop and you're like, I got to write this down. You just write a note to yourself. And some days you don't run very long because you're stopping every 5 minutes, and others. So the good thing about surfing is you don't really have a way, you don't generally your phone out there, so you don't have a way to do that. So you have to kind of think more deeply, I guess. And then hope that if it's a really good idea, remember it when you get back in, and the next wave doesn't knock it out of you, so to speak. But yes, there's times when I've gotten back to the car, like, I got to write that down. I think that's something I need to think more about, right? Or I got to remind myself to call somebody or check in with somebody or that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think especially today when working with leaders and the higher up they go, and let's say we do a quick analysis of their calendar, and it's the back-to-back-to-back thing that we've all heard about and seen, and unfortunately has become much more common. That's why I like Surf When You Can, because I think it's specifically it's amazingly written, by the way. Okay, stories are awesome. I find myself just, when you say, okay, I got 20 minutes, I'm going to squeeze in a little bit here, and before you know it, it's been 35 minutes, and I'm late, and no. Well, that obviously is a mark of really good books. So that's in one side. So huge props there. But also for the person who does have a calendar like that, look at you, a guy who's leading thousands of people, fully understanding that that's not the way you're going to be as good of a leader as you could be, is by having a schedule like that, because you do have to think and you have to make decisions. And so you have to almost, in a way, design your days to think and make decisions, not to have a lot of meetings. And that's much easier said than done, but I feel like your work can help people not only understand that, but then do it.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think it's very easy, like you said, in today's society, because we're just a arm's length away from a device that brings you a lot of information and demands for your time and attention to your detriment, often. I had another great mentor, and this is the whole rock and the jar theory. And, he said, your time is constrained to the volume of this jar. He envisioned this glass jar. And he says, your job is to take this box of rocks and fill that jar and manage your time. And he goes, and if you got to be careful, because, some of these rocks are big rocks, some are medium-sized rocks, and some are like sand and then smaller rocks. And he goes, so you have to prioritize your time. And if you don't do this correctly, you will never be able to get everything done. And not saying you have to get everything done. He goes, but what you don't get done shouldn't be a big rock. So when you make your decisions on how to spend your time, which is one of the most important things you do as a leader, he said, always start with the big rocks. What are the big rocks to you? And it could be personal, it could be family time, it could be business, like a strategic partnership. It could be, you name it. It could be your health, but those are the big rocks. And those rocks, you have to start your management of your time with the big rocks. Once you get the big rocks in, then you can put the smaller rocks, and those can be update meetings, or they could be meetings where no decision has to be made. You can fill them in there. And then when that's all done, then you take the rest of that box of time demands, which is just like sand and gravel, and then you can pour it in. If you do it the right way, you get the big rocks in first, the medium rocks go around it, and then the small rocks can kind of fill in where you have left over time. But if you don't, well, then all you're left with are little rocks. And little rocks to me are, the hundreds of emails we can get a day, or those, or things that just aren't going to matter at the end of the day. And I think we have to be careful. And I say email because I'm as guilty as anybody who it's like leaving dirty dishes in your sink. I hate to leave unread emails at the end of the day, but if you're not careful, then that's all you do all day is read and answer emails and not have any time for the big rocks. So I thought that was relevant advice that carried with me over my career.
The third part of your retirement speech, espresso. I love how you expanded on this in your book, but what is it about espresso that's so important?
Yeah, and I lived all over the world. It's one of the cool things about a military career, and we spent 2 years in Naples, Italy. And if you've ever been to Naples, Italy, they call it a pretty lady with dirty feet, which is probably a great way to capture it because there's, if you look down, they have days where they go on strike and they don't dump trash for months on end. And there's other days, so if you look down, the roads are dirty, but when you look up, you recognize the fact that you're surrounded by like 2,000-year-old plus, chapels and buildings, and it's such a loving, friendly culture that, so we had the privilege of being there for 2 years, and I worked in a NATO command. So, and, I didn't have a lot of experience in Europe at the time. Most of my deployments in the Navy and stuff were all in the Pacific. So it was my first real exposure to Europe and NATO and what that meant. And I think people have to understand, when you talk about military organizations, no one compares to the U.S. I mean, we are bigger. We have the best technology, the best systems, and it takes, a lot of effort to get there. So when we show up to any kind of alliance like NATO, we are always the big kid on the block. I mean, just in terms of people and money and equipment and stuff. And we also have an attitude like we are the only ones on that block that can get stuff done, and everybody else is just kind of like a distraction. And, we're going to, okay, come on, we'll invite you to the party. But in the end, it's going to be the U.S. It's going to take care of stuff. So I say that because you don't go to a NATO type job in Europe without some kind of, some prejudice, so to speak, on who's really going to get the work done. So when I got there, I was on fire, ready to make a difference and change the world, so to speak, because that was just my personality. And I was coming off a F-18 command tour where I deployed over the world with a squadron of, 12 F-18s and, team of 250. So I was just ready to tackle the world. And there's those times when you're at the airport and you're on the moving escalator or the flat, and if you're not careful, you go to step off and you stumble. Well, I felt like I was a guy on a really fast moving sidewalk, and I step off and welcome to NATO, and things are moving slower. So I found, day to day that I was trying to get work done and work on things that in hindsight weren't that important, but to me, I spent a lot of time. But I'm surrounded by a bunch of Europeans, so Italians and French and Germans and Brits, and one of them in particular stands out, a guy named Luigi Fazio, and the Italian Armed Services, and a great guy. And to this day, I just picture him with his friendly face. And shortly after I got there, every day he'd say Chopper, which is my call sign. It's like, Chopper, let's go get espresso. And so if you know anything about espresso or pizza, you know that Naples, Italy is kind of like just the epicenter. That's like, you're never going to get better pizza or probably better espresso. And they've been doing it for thousands of years. And I wasn't a big espresso drinker at the time. And I generally always found a reason, like I didn't have time to go with Luigi and the team. And I PowerPoint brief to work on or email to answer, the little rocks, as it were. And Luigi never gave up, and he'd ask at 9 or 11 or 2, like the 3 times a day they go get espresso. And after I'd been there about 2 months, he finally comes up and he's like, Chopper, it's not just for espresso. It's because we want to get to know you. It's about us getting to know each other so we can work together. And he said it in a nice way. And I recognize that as a leader here in NATO, I was probably failing. And one of my primary responsibilities was building relationships with our partners out there. So I went to espresso with him at 9, and I went again at 11, and, again, and to this day, I drink espresso every day. And I always think of Luigi when I do, but what I learned from that in that moment was, life's about relationships, both personally and professionally. And the time you spend nurturing those relationships, I think you'll be a better person, a better leader for it. And not that all relationships have to be transactional. That's not why you should ever, I think, have a relationship. Because I think you can grow and you can learn about life. And so then fast forward from that moment, after I started, having espresso with Luigi and the team, and about 6 months later, North Africa kind of went through their Arab Spring, and Gaddafi and the team there, his folks in Libya heading towards Benghazi, and it created a dynamic challenge, a military challenge for NATO that they hadn't faced in a long time. And so in my NATO role, suddenly we were tasked with trying, to organizing operations in Libya to prevent Gaddafi from essentially creating genocide and on Benghazi particularly. And it was not me by myself, but it was me and Luigi and everybody on that team. And even though initially I always felt like no one was working as hard as they should have been, let me tell you, when the bullets started flying and we were doing what we needed to do to help run that operation, Luigi and his team, they were all there every day, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, always had my back. And we had a pretty tight team. And I give them credit going back to the team we had built and the relationships we had established well prior to that, then when it really mattered, they were there. And we still had espresso. We still would find time in the operation to go have espresso. But yeah, life's about relationships. And I think we're better for them, and you learn from them. And I think you're a better leader as a result.
It's like in between times is when these relationships can be built. In between the work is important too, right? I think doing hard things together, as as a military guy, is super important to bond and to do hard things together. But also, it's important to probably have moments of vulnerability, which could happen during the espresso times, as well as just get to know you as a genuine human beyond just the output of work that you do. And I think that applies well beyond the military into all businesses. As a leader, our job, I think, if we want to be effective, is to create an environment where that can happen.
Yeah.
And think and be intentional and actively think of ways to put our people in positions for the relationships like that one that you built with them to grow. And whatever it may be in that particular country or place of work, how can I foster an environment so that people can get close, so that when it does get real, you were in lockstep, right. You were together.
Yeah, and I work at a nonprofit now, and I think those same things that you just talked about, I found to be true. It can, any nonprofit can be a stressful environment, particularly when you're focused on things like homelessness and substance abuse and stuff that we face in some of our bigger cities across the U.S. But it can be stressful, and you can have challenges every day, and so you do, as a leader, you have to find the time and find a way to, whether it's, it can be cheesy, it can be like a staff luncheon, it could be a barbecue, a family picnic, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. But the importance of stepping away from work so you can kind of build those relationships outside of work, I think, is extremely important. And I always found time throughout the Navy to be on, like, Navy's big on softball, because it's, as you get older, it's a sport you can play and ideally not get hurt. And if you were a mediocre baseball player in high school, you could feel like a decent softball player as you get older. But I always found softball was a great way to do the same thing and bond with folks off the ship, outside the squadron, and you generally, there's no rank on the ball field, I used to say, and we just call each other by our first names, and you really get to know people. And then, there's going to be professional boundaries when you go back to work, and I think everybody understands that. But the bonds you can build in that way, you can kind of, you can facilitate that. I think you're better as a command, and as a leader too. You get to know you get sometimes more unvarnished feedback that way in an environment like that. When you're on the ball field and you're throwing the ball around, getting ready for a game or something, and you can get a good sense of what's really going on at work that you might not get otherwise, because you might have removed that fog of war, fog of command, as it were, in hopes of and kind of going that direct to someone brand new on the potentially on the ship that sees something that no one else sees, and you want to welcome that feedback.
One of the qualities that you exemplified throughout the book, and you are right now as we're talking, is that of humility. And I'm thinking of a moment when, so you're a helicopter pilot and you wanted to become a fighter pilot, right? You have a F-18s, is that correct?
F-18s, yeah.
And as you're working to make that transition, which apparently, I'm not familiar with this, apparently that is not common. It doesn't happen very often, and especially when you had to go back to school and go back to relearn, and you, I guess, were one of the older people who were trying to do this, surrounded by a bunch of young people, that you had someone younger than you say, I'm not sure if you're ready. Can you, and the way that you responded really was super impressive. Instead of, I believe you're higher rank and older, you could have probably said something to him, and you didn't. Can you tell me that story about when you were making that transition and what you learned from that time?
Yeah, and when I went through flight school right after college, and I was selected helicopters and flew helicopters for a few years, and then went on staff tour. And generally in the military, you stay with that particular type of aircraft, helicopters in this case, for the rest of your career, because there's a lot of time and money spent on training you. So every year they allow a handful of folks to transition from one type of airplane or helicopter to another. And so there's a program that exists, and I was able to apply and got picked up for a program, but much like you said, much later in my career. So, normally you want to make some of these, you want to start off and stay with the community because there's so much you're going to learn. So I was given the opportunity, as a young kid, I always wanted to fly fighters, and, I was 16 when Top Gun came out. So that was kind of my vision. And I love flying helicopters. I would have been satisfied to only have flown those, but the chance to fly fighters now was just, for me, just something that was too good opportunity to pass up. And so, yeah, unlike with flight school, the first time when I'm single, not married, no kids, I'm going back through flight school a second time, married, 2 kids, certainly much more mature, but also having to, and I've had all this fleet experience where I felt like I'd been around, I'd been on deployments, I've been in combat. But what I learned pretty quick is you have to be humble. I mean, and this is something I think I learned, to be honest, from like my dad and my mom. And I grew up knowing that, you treat everybody with respect, and the more humble you are, the more you're going to learn. But it was like a slap in the face, like, yeah, you really need to be humble. Like, you're going to learn every day, only if you're willing to accept that, all your previous experience is just that. It's just previous experience, and it's not necessarily going to help you. And so be ready to learn. So fast forward, I'm at the culmination of this training to learn to fly F-18s, and I'm learning to land on the aircraft carrier both day and night. And it's certainly, of all the things you do as a Navy pilot, landing in an airplane on a flight deck day or night is certainly one of the most challenging and stressful, and can be the most unforgiving. So we spend a lot of time practicing, and we spend a lot of time evaluating. In fact, fast forward to the end of my career, even landing on the aircraft carrier where I was the captain of that ship, I'm still being evaluated and graded, and there's a formality to how I'm debriefed. And if it was a crappy landing, they're going to tell me. They're going to say, "Captain, that was not a good landing," right? And they're going to use their tools to remind me of that. So when I was going through training, I wasn't doing great. I mean, there's some areas that I transitioned well, and I was able to pick up flying jets pretty quickly, and others not as much. And landing on the carrier at night was something that I found more challenging than I expected. And so the end of the training, they kind of sit you down, they go through and they evaluate, and Ash was his call sign, and he said, "Hey, you're okay. I mean, you've made it this far. This is the culmination, but you're out on the cusp, and essentially, kind of leaving the door open. Like, if you want, you think you're good, then you're senior enough, and you've been around the fleet enough, and we'll pass you. You'll graduate and move on." But I also could kind of tell that he was indicating that there's still a lot. There's things I needed to learn, and I, in a very polite way. So I think for me, there was no question. Like, as much as I didn't want to go back through that phase of training again, because it's I was eager to get to a squadron and go out and do cool things. I knew I had a lot to learn. I knew that there was going to, it would be better now to accept that and say, okay, got it. Let me just do it again. And I felt like I gave him, that I was given the opportunity to go either way. And I just said, Ash, I have a feeling if I was a junior pilot, there would be no question. You'd tell me to start over, or, go back to this phase again, as it were. He said, "Yeah, you're right." I said, "Well, then there's no question. Let me go back and do it again." And I think in the end, I was stronger for it. Like, when I finished doing that phase again, and I got out to the fleet, and I was in my, on combat tours and stuff, I realized I was much stronger in that environment than I would have been if I just kind of muddled through and prayed to squeak across the finish line, as it were. So
that's hard, though. That's much. You say it like it's an easy thing. You have to really humble yourself. The much easier path is to say, "Well, yeah, I'm good. Let's go. Let's pass me through." I mean, what was going through your mind at that point to almost like not even question it, say, "Oh, well, then let's do it again," when it would have been much easier just to push yourself through?
Yeah, I mean, I think one, because I know particularly knew that's a challenging environment, and
yeah,
and all the training we do, and all the, whether it's air to air or air to ground tactics, and when you're flying a fighter jet, landing aboard the aircraft carrier still is the most challenging thing you do, I think, day to day, and it's the most unforgiving. And so I wanted to I didn't want to have to worry about it. I didn't want in the back of my mind, get through that, and then have to, in the back of my mind, have this seed of doubt on my real ability. I was much rather to face, I guess, the fact that I wasn't up to speed and didn't meet the cut, and then do it again, and then much more confidently get through the second time and not have to worry about it, and know that, okay, I step back, I got stronger for it, and I'll be better off in the long run. And yeah, I don't know how pragmatic I was at the time. I just think at the end it was just, I knew that was an important enough phase of flying and naval aviation that I just owed it to myself, my family, my squadron mates, everybody, to make sure I could be the best I could and go on. I think for me, it paid dividends because I didn't have to worry about that anymore.
How do you simulate that? Do you just do it on dry land where you'll say, okay, this is the aircraft carrier size, here are the wires that you got to hit? I assume that's how you practice, because you don't want to necessarily practice on an actual aircraft carrier until you're past a certain level of proficiency, because you could kill yourself, right?
Yeah.
It'd be really bad. So what's that like?
Well, so in this case with Ash, it was at that culmination. So we had gone to the ship at that point, and we landed on the ship.
But you've done a lot prior to the ship.
But you do almost every time in the Navy you land at F-18 on a runway, you almost simulate like you're landing on a carrier. And if you ever look at like an Air Force jet and a Navy jet side by side, the Navy jet has really beefy landing gear and struts down to the wheels, because every time we land, we generally land the same way you'd land on an aircraft carrier, kind of a hard approach, fast. And in Air Force, you can design Air Force airplanes to have skinnier landing gear, which saves weight, but they can also kind of float and glide and land much like you'd land an airliner on a long runway. So we practice all the time. And in flight school, when you get to that point, you practice, at least 100 times you're practicing landing, and they do paint on that part of on the runway. We call it the carrier box, and it simulates the width of the landing area on an aircraft carrier. And then the indicators you have to indicate your glide slope are also there on the side of the runway. So you practice a lot. Every time you do it, you're evaluated. And then once you get through that, then you go to the aircraft carrier, you do the same thing a day, and then you go to night as well. But it's unforgiving. And there's times when, there's, of all the things you do in naval aviation, daytime catapults and traps, or we always call it kind of the sport of kings. It's fun. It's, meaning that once you get good at it, you're comfortable, you recognize how neat it is to be able to land at 150 miles an hour, a 50,000 pound airplane. Pretty exciting. A night is always terrifying. Like, I don't care about how many times you've done it. You cannot come back from a night mission, land on an aircraft carrier, and not have your heart rate and blood pressure kind of go through the roof, and then you're up all night because you have this adrenaline spike. And that, I don't care if it's your first night trap or like your 100th or 1000th, you're still going to get that surge of adrenaline. So how many?
I got to think. Are you thinking of the landing the entire time? I mean, you can't, but in a way, it's in the back of your mind of when you're up at night thinking, "Oh God, I got to land this thing in the dark."
More than you want to, certainly.
Because you got a mission, you got stuff you got to do. Yeah.
When you catapult off on a night mission, like, it goes through your mind like it's going to be a dark landing. It's going to be a dark recovery, as we say, and then you have to learn to compartmentalize, otherwise it'll hang over your head like a bad doctor's appointment or something. And then at the end, but yeah, you're thinking about it. You're always managing your gas, but when you're younger and you're doing it, it's generally in the back of it's not really in the back of your mind. It's always in the front of your mind. As you get more senior and you get better and more, your ability to compartmentalize improves, and you can at least not worry about it for the last 20 minutes of the flight.
Do you actually keep count of how many times you've landed a plane on an aircraft carrier?
Yeah, you do. Everyone kind of keeps track both day and night, and the goals are always like 1,000 or these big milestones. And so most folks that have a full career probably have upwards of 1,000 traps.
Wow.
We say. And about usually, a third of those are nighttime or so. I don't have that many, as many as that, only because I was a helicopter pilot for the first portion of my career, but it was fun. Yeah.
Wow. One of the things that I took is you're a master of the fundamentals. And you said on the Roosevelt that you were leading, we insisted on performing damage control exercises at least once a week, sometimes twice. And I think this is whether it's sports, the military, and sometimes gets lost in the business world, is the fundamentals of the work. But it's whether you study Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan or some of the best of the best, they worked on their fundamentals every day. And yet at times it feels like this can be lacking. What can you just share your overall mindset and philosophy on mastering the fundamentals of whatever the job is?
Yeah, and I think I learned it. I think in baseball terms of play small ball, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
that we're not all going to be home run hitters, and in fact, some of the better teams in baseball have mastered the fundamentals of small ball, which they have good defense, they know how to get base hits, but they don't always have the big sluggers, and they don't think you need them. Most of us are not home run hitters, right? In any walk of life, we're good ball players, as it were. We've learned the ropes of the game we're in, but you've got to be good at the basics. And so in the military, we do that quite a bit. I mean, we practice, like I said, we practice every single time you land an aircraft carrier, you are being evaluated, you're being graded. And I don't care if you're the admiral on the ship or you're brand new nugget pilot in their first month on a deployment. We spend a lot of time mastering that because it is pretty unforgiving. And I think you can take that to other contexts of the ship. We do damage control because our ability to fight at any kind of combat scenario comes down to how well we can defend the ship, right? We're going to take hits. People are going to try to sink us, and we're going to have to be able to save the ship so we can continue to fight. And that's a fundamental skill. It's not as sexy as launching a strike mission to simulate some downtown, some major country, but it's important. And that's, our ability to continue to fight is our ability to defend that ship. So we practice things like damage control, the simulated fires or flooding. And, even in the nonprofit world or even the business world, right, it's easy for leaders to focus on the strategic vision, which I think is you've got to have. I think you have to have vision as a leader and know where you want to take the company or the organization. But I don't think you can lose sight of the fundamentals and what is required day to day to be successful. And when those don't go well, it impacts your strategic ability as a company to grow or expand in some cases. So even in the nonprofit world, I spend a lot of time with my staff and my directors focused on the day-to-day aspects of taking care of veterans and helping them overcome their challenges, whether it's homelessness or mental health or substance abuse. And we've got to do that right every day so we can make an impact. And then that allows us to also think how we can grow and expand our reach to help out more veterans in other areas. And I'm sure anyone in a business will tell you the same. You've got to be good at the fundamentals. No matter how great your vision is, if it's not in line with what you're doing day to day and you're not playing small ball well, then at some point there's going to be a disconnect. And that, it won't matter what your vision is. You want to be around to be able to get there.
Surf when you can. Again, love the title. I'm curious, what was your favorite part about writing this book?
So they say written out is thought out. And after 30 years in the military, you write, obviously in the military, you don't write novels. We tell a lot of sea stories, usually like in a bar with a bunch of fighter pilots around or something. But the ability to reflect back on 30 years and give credit to the lessons that I learned and the people I learned them from, and a way to honor the sailors I served with. So for me, it was just that chance to reflect and kind of, and in a way that I could kind of tie them all together. And a way I hope that other people can learn from as well and understand that, military is, we talk a lot about discipline and stuff in the military, but there's a softer side, meaning there's other things about being a leader that are equally as important. And that comes down to relationships and small ball and finding the time to think, all the things we talked about today. And I think that, if anything, people will understand how much I and really enjoyed my time in the military and how much I learned. And writing the book, I think, was a way for me to reflect on that in a way. Hopefully it'll share and resonate with others.
Leaving something that could certainly become part of one's identity can be really hard. I know this from playing athletics in college and a little bit afterwards, and then having to move on when they retire you, in my case. But yours, you chose to retire, but then the next step, right? You got a full life to live. How has that impacted you? It hasn't been that long, but life after the military, that is tough for a lot of people. How has that impacted you emotionally, mentally? How are you adjusting?
Yeah, I think, the first thing I did when I retired is I committed to 30 straight days of surfing. And I told my wife, I said, I don't care what the weather's like, I'm going to get in the water for 30 straight days. And I did. I stuck to that. And there were some horrible days out there. But so, and part of it's trying to figure out what you really want, right? What do you want to do? How can you make an impact? And I still don't know if I know that, right? And even in the military, I just knew I enjoyed what I was doing. And I always said I would stay in the military as long as I was having fun. And I had fun for all 30 years. I think it came down to what motivates me to get up. What do I want to do and how do I make an impact? And it's different for everybody. And coming from the military where it's a career of service and sacrifice, and you're surrounded by similar like-minded people, I think in some ways we always search for that. You try to find that in the corporate world and business world and the nonprofit world. So I feel lucky that I ended up where I am right now in the nonprofit world, helping run a pretty large nonprofit, taking care of veterans that are at risk and in need. And what I found is the nonprofit world is very similar. It's about service. It's about taking care of people. You don't go in the nonprofit world to get rich. No one does, but you're passionate about what you do and you sacrifice to make a difference. So I think it's a natural transition for me. I don't necessarily won't do this for the rest of my life, but right now I find it rewarding and I feel like I can make an impact. And I think if you can find something you're good at, that you think you can make an impact, and you don't worry about things like money, and you're doing it for the right reasons. I think that when veterans, people retire from anything, as long as they understand that, what satisfies them, what makes them, feel successful every day. And it's not about being, home run hitter, not about, a lot of money. It's just about feeling like you make a difference and impact in the world. So for me, it's worked out. And I like, Veterans Village of San Diego, where I'm at right now. They're doing some pretty good work. So I'm excited to be there. But
well, one more, if you're meeting with somebody who's fresh out of college, let's say early to mid 20s, they love your story, admire how you've done the things that you've done, and they want to leave a positive dent in the world, but they don't really know what they want to do. What are some general pieces of life/career advice you'd give to that person?
I tell them to have a broad approach. I mean, I tell folks, one, I think people should volunteer more. I think, whatever you end up doing, whether you want to go to law school or get your MBA or go to corporate world, find time to volunteer. I think that will help you'll understand your community better, the nation better, maybe. And I think you'll find a way you can make a difference. And not saying it has to be a full-time job. I just think everyone can volunteer in some capacity wherever you are. And I think I always found that satisfying. Even my military career, I always did Habitat for Humanity. Wherever I was stationed, I'd find a way to do that, help build a home or two. And I just enjoyed the experience and feeling like, I was helping the local community out. So I think anybody at that age where you're young, you have a lot of energy, a lot of great ideas, find a way to volunteer, help out within your community. That'll help kind of broaden your opportunities out there. Know that, you're not, whatever you choose, you're not stuck with it for 30 years. I mean, I liked everything about the military, so I didn't have to contemplate something different for, about 30 years, but don't be afraid to try something. And if you try something and it works out great, it's a good fit, good culture, and you feel like you're making a difference, then do it. If not, then, pivot to something else. I think I grew up in an environment where I felt like you're going to get one choice, and then that's it. You better choose wisely. Now I think people are cognizant of the fact that there's many opportunities out there, and you can pivot and you can do many things at once, and you'll find something you feel like you're good at. You can make a difference, and it's inspiring.
So good, man. Super appreciative. The book's called Surf When You Can, Lessons in Life, Loyalty, and Leadership from a Maverick Navy Captain. Awesome call sign, Chopper. So great. I love it. I highly, as I mentioned before about the book, it's so well written that it kind of sucks you in, and you keep turning the page, which is not easy to do as a writer, I know. So love the book, love the stories, and I love just the humanity of it, how you've taken these real life stories and then added practical takeaways for us as readers to implement based on the learnings from your life. That's awesome, man. So huge props. Love the book, and I would certainly love to continue our dialogue as we both progress. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity. And like I said, it was a fun book to write, but it was just, I really enjoyed my career, and I'm honored I get to share it with folks, and hopefully people learn from it along the way, but really enjoyed the discussion today, Ryan. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you so much.